Alright, everyone, welcome to Day 9 Daily number 8, I believe we're on right now. I just wanted to let everyone know that today is November 2nd, 2009. So that way, if you're watching on demand or watching on auto looping, you know when this happened. So, November 2nd, Day 9 Daily number 8. Today we have Hogel. Oh no, sorry, I've been doing so many Hogel games. Today is not Hogel. We are going to be doing a little bit. Oh yeah, that's right, I do have a little bit of oil on that thing now. Sorry, I could just rub that off really fast. God, look at me getting oil all over my camera. I was just like so excited. I was just like getting all oily fingered up here. Hopefully that's just a touch better. Oh, look at me. Look at me in high res. Sweet. Alright, fantastic. Today's going to be luxury versus Geumchi. So again, the big theme of the last few games has been patience. Not getting really overexcited and just trying to gun it and win. And that's what we see here today. Luxury freaks out and just desperately tries to win, and then he loses. And it's also very inspirational from the Protoss side to just constantly be holding on, and then you win. And then, oh my god, you should have seen the look on his face. He felt so good right before he lost 0-2 to Hwasan after that. So, still really, really good mindset to be in, the way Geumchi did it. But yeah, so let's go ahead and do my little Procaster transition over to the screen. Whoa. And let's just check things out. So right now we have this game loaded up, but let's just take a brief moment to check out Heartbreak Ridge. We're not going to spend too much time talking about this since I've done quite a bit of analysis on this in the past. So right here we have fairly open map, and again the big thing is that Zerg spawns here. Really hard to, after you've taken this one, to take a fourth base. This is generally the one that you need to take as Zerg. So that way you can defend this spoke here and then this area here. But even so, it's a pretty awkward open area for Zerg. And if Protoss can successfully hold all this stuff here, it becomes increasingly hard for Zerg as the game continues. Oh my god. Today I'm not drinking hot tea, I'm drinking hot coffee. So hopefully it'll be a little bit more alert. Alright, here we go. Starting the game right off. A little bit about myself in this last week. As all of you, I'm sure, note, Unity, the game engine, is now being offered for free. If any of you guys have ever tried to make games and have used an engine that's really bad, you know how exciting it is to hear that the best game engine ever for indie developers is free. Totally sweet. I'm just elated about that. So for the next 2 weeks, I'll be working on my current game, and then I'll be submitting it to the Independent Games Festival at the Game Developer Conference. Hopefully you guys can check that out if it gets accepted. The game engine, once again, is called Unity. Check out Unity. I always like to share a little bit about what's going on with me, because I don't want to spend too much time talking about what these drones are doing. I guess one thing I could focus on right now is the fact that he is sending all his drones to different mineral patches. I mean, a lot of players just tend to make a box around the drone and just send it to a nearby mineral patch. Always make sure you know exactly what the distribution is there. Delicious. So, also perhaps useful to note is notice this interesting little scouting pattern by this Protoss. He loops around the Overlord. Notice that hump right there. He never ends up seeing it. And as a result, it helps the Protoss look a little bit sneakier. Because when this probe gets up there, what goes through the Zerg's mind? The Zerg says, wait a minute, here's a probe who is coming out pretty early, as we can clearly see from this food count, but this Overlord didn't see a damn thing when it went by. So already, even though this Protoss is doing the most normal thing in the world, early expanding, Luxury's now thinking, uh-oh, now I gotta worry about some sort of proxy gate. That's what we call gaining an advantage without ever really having to do anything about it. You sort of fool your opponent, and if he falls for it, you get a little bit of an advantage. If he doesn't fall for it, no big deal. You're early expanding and everything's normal anyways. And all it took was that little crick right there, was just taking that little special path. This is, right now, this is a mistake by Luxury. Very clearly a mistake. What you should be doing is you should send 2 drones, just like this, because one drone does lose to one probe. But then you should take a few shots, and then you need to send 1 drone back right now. If you have 1 drone against 1 probe, it's much easier to plant that hatchery down, and because of the damage the probe's already taken, this drone can finish it off. If you have 2 drones here, you end up manor droning yourself. This just hurts. I don't really like dealing with this. It's not devastating. A lot of Zergs just flip out, and they don't do this calm response, which is just to expand there. A lot of Zergs just start... I've seen Zergs send 5 or 6 drones to the Protoss base to try to kill the cannons, and then try to overwhelm them with lings. You don't need to do that, man. Just expand. Everything's going to be great. Everything's going to be fine. Just plant a hatch right there. Hooray! Because honestly, having 100 minerals in the form of a pylon this early in the game, potentially hurtful for the Protoss. We already see that this Protoss had to go Forge, Cannon, and now Nexus, when he could have gone Forge, Nexus, and then Cannon. All ends up balancing out. Now, again, we're going to see this so many times. Luxury just gets so overexcited in this game. Luxury just starts freaking out and going crazy, and we're going to focus so much on all the little stuff that's happening just right here for much of the later stages of the game. So just bear that in mind. Of all that's going on right now is going to lead into this hyper overexcited aggression. Coffee. Getting a little bit cold right now. Cold coffee is just the worst. And again, if you read Korean, this is very clever. It's very clever writing here in Korean. I don't read Korean. I'll never know. Hopefully one day I'll be that smart. But right now, all I can do is drink coffee and talk about StarCraft. Bazing! Luxury, I feel like he took this gas a little bit earlier than normal because this hatchery got delayed. I don't really know how I feel about that. It seems to be working out okay. Notice that his minerals and his gas together are very low. If, for instance, his gas was really high, I'd be a little bit like, why are we stockpiling gas this early on? Unless, of course, he's going Mutalisks, and it's part of his plan, but it might be a little early. I don't know. Don't really have an opinion on it. I kind of have to rewatch the replay and see exactly what was happening with his timing. Very standard stuff going on for Geumchi. Notice that this wall in that you can't see, that hopefully you've just remembered. Geumchi, oh yeah, there we go. Forge on the bottom, gateway on top. That's how you wall with Protoss. Forge on the bottom, gateway on top. Do that a lot. Now, in terms of the, I'm not going to call it the metagame, because again, that term's silly. Because Protosses lately have been powering a lot, that's the trend. Haha, notice how I avoided the word metagame very cleverly. Metagame. I avoided metagame. Love avoiding that one. Because so many Protosses have been powering so hard, they get the Corsair and then they do stuff. I'm always eager to see Protosses be more aggressive early on. I was actually watching Geumchi Flying versus Great. That's another really sweet game that, very similarly to Bisu versus Jaedong, Geumchi Flying was really aggressive in the early and mid-game stages, long before that Corsair ever popped out. And that's part of the reason, and that's part of what helped both of those players win, is just early action going on with these Zealots. So I'm always really intrigued to see if more Protoss players are going to be doing this sort of thing. And already we see that this Citadel that's on screen right now is going to be Geumchi's plan. He's, instead of going for the usual Corsair combination, he's going more for the Zealot leg speed to just put a lot of pressure on players. We're starting to see that transition back to just a lot of force from Protoss early on, as opposed to a lot of cuteness with Corsairs. And because this Overlord was in his base, let's actually go back to the minimap so you can see that. Because this Overlord was in this base long enough, he ended up just building a Stargate anyways, and we'll see that Geumchi cancels it. This Stargate is late. It was built after the Citadel of Adun. So now we have the 2 gateways going down at front. And this already, even if Zerg pokes in here and sees 2 gateways, as a Zerg player, I would go, oh yeah, he's doing the totally standard Corsair into Templar transition. It's very typical to see players build 2 gateways up there when they do that, so I wouldn't react to that at all. I would just assume what I think is coming, and pretty much 99% of the time be correct. So again, that's part of what you want to be doing whenever you're doing something that even might seem slightly unorthodox. Or if there are 2 totally normal, totally orthodox choices, you pretend to have the look of one, and even if your opponent doesn't fall for it, you're still okay because you're playing stably. We already saw that Geumchi did that early on. He just did a slight scouting change with his probe, completely no effect on the early expanding, but has a chance to give him a little bit of an advantage. So that sort of thing to think about. Luxury, of course, very, very perceptive. He was in there long enough to know that that Stargate felt kind of late. He saw that cybernetics core down, and you don't even have to be that much of that focused on extreme subtleties to pick up on that. You just note that the cybernetics core finished, quite a while passed, and then a Stargate went down. That seems unusual, so it's really good that he poked in and out like that. So we see a transition to Templar pretty quick, I would say. And also, I would have liked to see a +1 attack upgrade come out a little bit earlier. Bisu did that against Jaedong, and the added benefit of killing Zerglings in 2 hits with your first Speed Zealots is tremendous. In fact, Zerg vs. Protoss used to revolve entirely around that. Excuse me. The Observer really hasn't gotten the chance to poke around in the Zerg's base yet. We'll see that everything's pretty much normal. We have the Speed Zerglings, we have a bunch of hatches going down, 5 hatches, the most normal stuff in the world, but right now we see that this hatchery got canceled. This is a response that I'm not quite sure how I feel about it. So here's my take on it. Here are all the things I think about when I see that. So part of me wants to go, hey, that's good. He's not, he's responding properly. He was perhaps tricked into thinking that Corsairs were coming, and then he canceled and after he saw these Speed Zealots, and he knows, wow, I really can't let that hatchery finish. I need that money to build sunken colonies. So that's what I would call good crisis management. But the problem is, you don't really want to have to cancel a hatchery when you see early Zealots with legs. Ideally, you would have some style, some opening that would be able to deal with Corsairs and those Speed Zealots without having to do that drastic of a choice. So I'm kind of torn on that. Maybe Geumchi just tricked Luxury so hard that this is a good response by Luxury, but if you ever have the chance to do this sort of thing in your game where you kind of go, ugh, and you have to cancel, try to think of a way you could have avoided that completely in the first place. My God, I'm so intelligent. That's what happens when you drink coffee instead of tea. The caffeine gets the brain pumping. Part of the reason why I like energy drinks, but coffee is a little bit easier on my heart. I've noticed that if I have one of those like thorn gristle pump juices, my heart actually starts getting like palpitations. It's really uncomfortable. Good response by Luxury, continuing to make sunken colonies in very nice places as well. And and here we saw one Mutalisk there. That I think might actually be part of the reason why Luxury canceled this hatchery. A lot of times when you see a player doing this sort of Zealot opening, you end up going Mutalisks. In fact, the way that Zerg vs. Protoss used to go is the Protoss would open up going Zealots with speed with an early +1 attack upgrade, and the Zerg player would go 3 hatch, expanding, and then he would get Mutalisks very quickly, and only later add on a 4th and 5th hatch. When it transitioned to Corsairs, people, instead of getting Mutalisks, got Scourge and spent that money on hatches. So here Luxury probably went, let me back up a little bit. Let me cancel this hatchery and let me get Mutalisks now that I see that these Zealots are coming out and that I don't need to worry that much about Corsairs. That feels a little bit awkward, though, to have to still do that drastic of a change. Yeah, see, here are the Mutalisks that he would not have been able to build if he'd let that hatchery continue building. Nice aggression by Geumchi. Really, with these early Zealot groups, you want to get in there and do a ton of damage. You don't want to be too passive just backing up. It's okay if he loses a lot of Zealots early on here. And by a lot, I mean 4 or 5. I mean, if you're running in there with 17, 18 Zealots and all of them are dying, that's clearly bad. Yeah, speaking of clearly bad, don't do that. You don't need to force Dark Templar in. It's good to try to distract here so you can run Dark Templar in there, but don't force something to happen. I briefly want to note, let's rewind here just a little bit, right to about, we'll see it in just a minute. But yeah, okay, and about, I just bought these glasses. I actually got called by Costco right before the cast, picking them up tomorrow. So I shaved a beard, I'm getting glasses. Maybe I'll do something else drastic, like get a nose ring or something like that. I'll just change slowly over time. If you watch me on demand, I'll be slowly transforming into a completely different person over the course of 2.5 hours or something like that. This is a really good response by Geumchi to immediately back up and build all these cannons right there, especially considering he doesn't have any sort of anti-air infrastructure. And see this Dark Templar? It would have been so helpful if there were 2 Dark Templar there instead of one that's about to die. I'm not quite sure how much I like these Maelstrom guys, the Dark Archons. I just don't have a well-formed enough opinion to make it like a really long comment on it right now, but I'm currently a little skeptical on it. Well, we saw back here, just a few frames back, we saw these Mutalisks sweep up, and look at this really nice response. This is absolutely awesome response by Geumchi. So we see Mutalisk coming up. These two Templar are vulnerable. A lot of players try to run their Templar. Really good players, you'll see just merge them. In Bisu vs. Shine, Bisu was really good about merging Templar that seemed about to be sniped. Look, here comes the merge. A little bit too late, but exactly the sort of thing you want to be doing. Still don't see that Forge researching. Would like to see that. Also, a lot of players are not used to getting Mutalisk harassed when they early expand and don't have Corsairs, because it's so common to have that Stargate that we saw Geumchi cancel early on. So, for those players who are so used to having Corsairs against Mutalisk, it's going to be really uncomfortable dealing with just Mutalisks when you only have Templar tech. So first, if you're in that scenario, get the Archon, but then do not be afraid at all to get Dragoons with range. Dragoons are very helpful against the Mutalisks when you have that Archon there as well. Players occasionally tend to just go Archon Zealot in this scenario, but it's a lot more convenient to have the Dragoons there just to do a little bit of extra damage as things are going on. This is good harass by Luxury. I like this pylon here. Ended up not being helpful. Ended up actually perhaps hurting Geumchi a little bit. By the way, I'm calling him Geumchi. I hope to God you guys say it like that, because I'm just going to keep pronouncing it that way. But yeah, Geumchi, I like building this up here. It's a nice spotter. And of course, you're generally not assuming your opponent's going to be going Mutalisk, because that's a little bit old school. But continue to do this sort of thing, building this pylon. I think this is totally fine. Now, here's something that's really interesting about getting this Dark Archon that early, is that this is a very small force. It's a very specific force. This force says, I'm not going to die to Mutalisks or Zerglings. Anything else I'm going to have trouble against. So the whole point of this is not exactly to bust in case there's sunken colonies or lurkers. It's designed to exploit a Zerg who hasn't built sunken colonies yet. And if the Zerg hasn't, he's going to have to spend a lot of money immediately to build them. This is the key to Protoss vs. Zerg, especially if you're doing this sort of ground-oriented play, is to make sure you do lots of aggressive pressure. That's why Geumchi moved out really early on with all those Zealots. It's so key to just make sure you're in Zerg's face, getting momentum, and being able to defend expansions just by having the extra map control. This is actually very impressive by Luxury, that he's able to respond this intelligently, that he's able to mass up Zerglings in this case. Seems counterintuitive, would have been a lot weaker if Geumchi had gotten that +1 attack upgrade early. Again, it's the sort of thing that most Zergs, especially nowadays, are not going to think of. So extra super duper props to Luxury. Actually, I just want to make sure that one of these guys gets clicked on, because I've been talking about Geumchi as though he hasn't gotten the +1 attack upgrade, and it doesn't seem like it. I just want to make sure I'm not wrong on that, because it doesn't look like it. That's so brilliant to take out that one cannon. Any cannon that is not defended by other cannons, that can only defend itself, that's always a good target, because it immediately makes the Protoss go, ugh, and sort of worry about these units, and especially about the front where you're going to want Templar. That's a really cool thing to do, to take out that cannon. So please click on the Archon. Please click on it. Click on the Archon. Click on the Archon. We're going to click on the Templar. Click on the Archon. I just want him to do it, because I'm really curious if he's gotten that +1 attack upgrade. Anytime you want to be really aggressive early on with Zealots, definitely think of ways to incorporate +1 attack into play, because I will admit, from a Zerg player's point of view, it is a terrifying thing to deal with. Oh, good. Okay, so in fact, yeah, I was like, great, I was right. He didn't get attacked. I am the man. So we, in fact, did not see +1 attack upgrade for Luxury there. So let's actually just note here that with this cannon gone, we're getting some free Zealot shots here. Really smart thing to do. Most Zerg players, actually, especially modern Zerg players, are just not used to Mutalisks early on. They're used to Mutalisks to help with Hydralisks, which is what's massing up right here, in order to snipe off Templar, but they're not used to the idea of getting a whole bunch of Mutalisks when the Protoss player pretty much only has Archons and Storm to defend. It's great to take out Zealots. Incredibly good to take out Zealots. And especially with this cannon gone, these are a little bit free targets. A good example of Mutalisks taking out Zealots is a game from quite a long time ago of Yellow, ARNC, more commonly known as YARNC. YARNC against Kingdom on Longinus 2. There's actually a first-person VOD of it. Okay, let's back up a little bit. Let's back up a touch and talk about what you shouldn't do. First of all, allow me to say that you should definitely watch YARNC vs. Kingdom on Longinus. That game is actually, not only is it on YouTube as a game to watch, but it's also a first-person VOD from YARNC's point of view. So that is a beautiful example of classical Zerg vs. Protoss and how to really use Mutalisks very well against a Zealot Archon-style army. YARNC does a great job of killing off Mutalisks. Now that we've said the words great job, let's focus on a really bad thing, okay, right? Let's focus on the worst thing possible. All right, sweet. Let's... if you have Mutalisks doing something in the Protoss base, anytime they're not actively moving in some direction, you should be really careful, because they need to accelerate to get out of Storm. And this... So right now, that's... look, he's smiling a little bit, but that's just a sort of save face. That clearly is bad. I mean, that's the sort of thing that can get you in the biggest amounts of trouble and potentially just swing the game back into your opponent's favor. Really, though, if you're going Mutalisks, they can be an extreme benefit, especially to pick off Zealots and to pick off Archons, and Templar, obviously, if you're doing the 5-hatch Hydra style. But that does show why players slowly moved away from that, because you can lose Mutalisks so quickly in the dumbest way possible. I mean, Luxury in this case could have just been looking back at his base and building 2 evolution chambers and then going right back to the front. He hasn't seen any Templar come out recently at all. And that's, of course, because they were hidden back down in the back of Geumchi's base. But you need to be very careful when you have Mutalisks running around Protoss base. Right now, though, we do want to note how beautiful of a situation Luxury set himself up in. I think that this is incredible play by Luxury. Luxury is a very aggressive player, and look how he set this up. See, here's all these Speed Zerglings here. First, he had Speed Zerglings down here to hold off the early push. Actually, let me back up even more. Luxury noticed something was up with this Stargate, and then when he saw the Speed Zealots come out, he canceled the hatchery, made a bunch of Mutalisks, which were very helpful in harassing around here and holding off the push down here. And then he had a whole bunch of Zerglings in this area prepared for the next push. Then he harassed a whole bunch with Mutalisks, which he sadly lost right here. But now look at how effective this push is going to be. Look at how Luxury has set himself up to be almost impenetrable despite all these crazy changes, and how difficult it's going to be for Luxury to just hold against this massive push. Or excuse me, how difficult it's going to be for Geumchi to hold against Luxury's massive push. Already we're noticing a little bit of a food disparity. We're noticing that Zerg's a little bit behind, always a little bit dangerous. And what we're going to see throughout this entire aggression is that Geumchi is really good about setting this expansion up here. He's not getting tunnel vision and focusing on this. And Luxury does have tunnel vision. You see nothing but units streaming up here. We don't see any expanding here. We don't see overlords spreading out. We don't see any other advantage Luxury's trying to take. We only see him trying to end the game immediately, which is just one of the worst mistakes to have. This almost certainly looks like it's going to work. Luxury just pounding in here. Notice how Luxury doesn't get too aggressive in here. He kills off this cannon, but this is a great spot to be in. Nice funnel for units. A little bit bad Storm micro, but right now Geumchi is in a very tense situation, but by no means has lost this game. I think Luxury clearly has an advantage, but I don't think that Geumchi is somehow about to suffer devastating defeat or anything like that. Notice how calmly he places his units back here. He knows that Hydralisks can become very vulnerable if they move a little bit too far forward. That's kind of funny he didn't have the forge. A lot of times, if you don't have the building, it's very easy to build the building right where you need it and then to try to use stuff. So for instance, if you build a creep colony and you want to morph it into a spore colony, if you click on it and go, whoops, I don't have an evolution chamber, it's very easy to build it right there. So likewise, we have Geumchi saying, all right, time to build some cannons. And he clicks on the probe and says, whoops, no cannons. And he builds the forge right there. Try to resist that urge to build the forge right in that location, because this is so vulnerable and you really do want a forge back home. So just take a little bit of extra time to poke back and to build that cannon. Or excuse me, to build that forge in your main so you can build cannons up here. Now watch something really interesting that's going to happen here. Right here. Let's just look at Luxury's money. I don't know what happened here. Okay, watch how it never decreases. So here it just passed 300. Here's Luxury, probably microing. Just past 400. Just past 500. And now it's going to pass 600, and it's going to continue to climb, and it's never going down. I don't know how this happened. That is shocking. Anytime you're playing a game and your money gets over 500, you should really stop, go back, and think hard as to exactly why your money's getting that high. For instance, if you're saving up for Mutalisks, it's totally great. It's totally great. For instance, if it looks like that might be what Luxury was doing, saving up his money for Mutalisks. But of course, you need to make sure that that was all part of the plan. What you don't want to have happen is have your money get that high and then to say, oh, well, it's okay because I'm Zerg and I can save up, my larva and, I have a little bit of money left over, but that's okay. It's inexcusable to have bad macro. And really, 500 is the amount of minerals where you should stop in your replay and think really hard, what is the purpose of having my money be this high? Because in almost all the time, you'll just say, there isn't a reason, and I just should have macroed better. And I put that number out there just as a tool for you to help analyze your own play, to think a little bit more about how to focus on your macro in-game. And instead of just going, oh, I better macro more, you have this number at hand. So Mutalisks here, right now we're seeing the usual sort of abuse of 5-hatch Hydralisks, that we have a bunch of Hydras, and we're going to pick off Templar. And see, here's the more modern use of Mutalisks, to pick off Templar, because notice how easily they melt. That's why I made such a huge point of emphasis when Luxury was harassing with Mutalisks early on, because the feel is so different when you have Mutalisks in the early game as opposed to Mutalisks in the mid and late game. So Geumchi, even though he was far back against the wall, he's advancing out forward because that's how you defend that expansion. Never want to be getting too passive here. And look how he gets on this high ground spoke. I like being very aggressive as Zerg. It's definitely fun, but right now, I haven't really seen any extra drones built from Luxury. He has a clear positional advantage considering Protoss is even scared to move out here. But he's not using his positional advantage to do anything other than attack more and more and more. These Overlords have only moved a little bit. There's no expanding going on here. I don't see any lurker tech coming here. If you look on the minimap, you'll note that gas has not been built at that expansion. There's no long-term focus in this play. And as I've said a whole bunch of times, originally in an essay I wrote called The Marginal Advantage, you only need to win by an infinitesimally small margin. If Luxury had the advantage that he has right now and just let the game play out, he'd win. If he has a huge advantage and crushes his opponent, you still win. There's no reason to just batter down your opponent now when it's so much easier to use your small advantage, let the game play out, and win. So right now, this seems like a pretty decent amount of units for Luxury, but this defense is going to be pretty solid by Geumchi. This is great response. I tried to pause it, but I accidentally missed the button. So again, quite a lot of Hydralisks, but notice how many gateways Geumchi has. So he has this one at the front. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and of course there's the 9th one at the front. Anytime you're getting contained and your third has been delayed, build a huge amount of gateways, especially if you've just lost units, because now you don't need to spend money on pylons. All right, awesome. Look at this. Oh, yeah. All right. Sweet. This Protoss player was calm enough to, while being bashed at the front door, expand all the way up here. So great. And look at this defense by Geumchi. At this point, I didn't feel as though Geumchi was about to lose. I was looking at what Luxury was doing much more as this desperation play. Even if these Hydralisks start to bust into this center of Protoss's main, it's still going to be a little bit difficult because there's 8 gateways in there. And Protoss already has this expansion up and running. This was probably the key that helped save Geumchi this game, because even if this ends up failing, there's virtually nothing that Luxury can do. Or excuse me, even if this expansion even if this defense ends up failing right here, Geumchi still has this expansion that's in a very, very nice spot, easily tucked away with all his production center right there. And look at this food number, 44 for Luxury. I mean, really, from about this stage in the game, from a little bit earlier, actually, I'm making circles around the YouTube bar that you can't see. Let me just say, from about 2 minutes ago, it looked like a nice position for Luxury to start taking an advantage, getting really strong positional control over Geumchi. But he didn't. He just tried to bust in there and win. And at this point, I was just feeling depressed because I was looking at this mini-map for the longest time during the game, and there's just more stuff moving up here. I want to see all movement this way stop, because that implies that there's a whole bunch of drones being made, a whole bunch of defenses being set up. Or, excuse me, not defenses, but long-term type plays set up. Lurker is getting more upgrades, building a gas at that third base. This is so unnecessarily aggressive. Protoss, I'm very, very proud of. Oh, God, I feel like a proud father who's just patting his son on the head. You're such a good boy. You made those gateways. And he's like, yeah, Daddy, I did it. And I put a baseball cap on and we walk off into the sunset. Because really, this expansion up here is great. And the fact that so long ago, Geumchi mined out this little mineral back here, now he can easily walk one Templar up and watch how this attack goes. Come on, Templar. Alright, well, I guess I misremembered. This attack is actually going pretty well. But watch what happens. This attack looks terrifying. So many Hydralisks just slaughtered all these cannons. And oh no, is this expansion going to fall? Whether it falls or not, this is pretty much all the units that Luxury has. This is it. This is the extent of things. Maybe could have controlled that a little bit better, but still going to take about that many losses. Chances are this expansion was never going to fall, and even if it didn't, all those Hydralisks would have been gone, and we still would have had only 49 food for Luxury. That's so low. That's just the most depressing thing in the world when you say to yourself, yeah, I'm going to be super, super aggressive. I'm going to win it right now. And it just falls apart. You're just trying to pound your opponent down, and then suddenly you hit a point where you go, holy shit, I can't win this way. Look at how many not drones there are. Okay, let's rewind. So we see this huge amount of probes. Geumchi mining out, getting a little bit low, but still has huge production capacity. That is not that many drones. It's maybe 9 or 10 drones. And then we go here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 drones. That's just no economy whatsoever. This hatch probably never had anything making out of it. That, of course, is the danger anytime you try to go for these sorts of openings. What you really want to do is you want to think about an advantage that you can gain by being a little bit aggressive. You don't want to think about a way to win immediately by being a little bit aggressive. That is so late. And here we have like 4 Mutalisks coming in. Look, can't even kill a Templar in one hit. And this is the tendency that does happen, especially if you're in this position where you're a little bit screwed. Right now, in terms of educational value, I would not focus very much on what Luxury does right now. It's all about what happened beforehand. A lot of Zergs will get in this spot and they'll go, ugh, well, I guess I'll just keep going Hydra Lurk since that seems pretty good. And it really is all you can do, but you just don't want to be in the spot where it's really all you can do. What you want is for Protoss to freak out, be pushed back here, to have not started this expansion, and only when Geumchi does push out, this expansion's taken, Lurkers are defending all around the middle of the map, and Protoss goes, oh god, I held it off, and now I have to face that amount of econ? You don't want Protoss to hold it off and go, great, now I win, which is exactly what we're seeing now. Finally, Luxury's toned down the aggression, and for what? He just has no infrastructure. Still hasn't taken the gas down there, and I'm not saying Zerg should take the gas down here, that it's a big mistake to not be taking the gas given what Luxury's doing. Instead, what I'm saying is that Luxury never should have done any of this in the first place, and the lack of gas here is indicative of that. I mean, look at this sniping. Again, this sniping is only going to get you so far. You can't really do that into the late game and hope to rely on it. And right here, just this final push just really demonstrates how weak pure Hydralisk is without any sort of support, which is why players rely so much on Mutalisks and Lurkers. Correctly so, as I should note. Here it comes. Go, Geumchi. We have 2 more Mutalisks getting ready to do some sniping. The Sniping Brothers. Okay, so they're going to shoot maybe 3 times, and then all the Zealots just pretty much attack move, and here come the Templar, just obliterating everything. And I felt so bad for Luxury watching this game, because it's so easy to think, yeah, I'm just gonna end it right now. In any matchup. I mean, this happens with Zerg players when they 9-pool speedling rush Terrans, and they've broken in, and they're running around, and they're thinking, yeah, I'm gonna keep making Zerglings and bash the Terran apart. And then they just lose. Terran finally just barely holds everything off, makes 3 Firebats, and the game's done. Like, over. Like, good game. Immediately thereafter. And this is exactly what we're seeing. We saw Luxury stop being aggressive because he was screwed. He couldn't win there, so his only fighting chance was to maybe expand around a bit. And clearly, as we're seeing right now, with all these storms, this is just not going to go anywhere. I just feel so bad for Luxury. He's just in shock right there. And I mean, seriously, this group was just insane to watch. I mean, this set, Luxury is the sort of player who you expect to always be in at least a Star League, and you always expect to be at least an ace player or a huge crutch for KTF, but he's just somehow fallen apart lately, and it really bums me out. But still, I think that this game is so illustrative of how important it is not to freak out and get so excited at the idea of winning right now. You just want to win much later. In fact, I think Icy Cup gives you an average time length of your games. I know Brood War Chart does. Try to make that a little bit longer. A lot of players will have close to around 10-minute average game length, unless you're Terran, because Terran vs. Terran is so long. But around 11 minutes, 10 minutes is an average game length. My average games tend to be around 14 minutes. I actually play very, very long games. I'm much more comfortable in the late game. And I really recommend that, because not only is it way more fun, but you get much more experience. And you don't end up with these sorts of humiliating, embarrassing losses. So we're going to take some questions in just a second, but let's just re-review this game, and so we can really highlight the point where Luxury should have just chilled out. So here, I'm really liking what Luxury's doing, right? This is where we have this Zealot attack, and we have all these Mutalisks. Very, very good response. Luxury has not forgotten the era where players relied on Mutalisks against mass speed Zealot in the early game against early expanding Protosses. He has not forgotten. He knows the strength of it. Look at how even these food counts are. 52 to 50. Zerg's actually exceeding the Protoss in terms of food count. That's unheard of, especially in the later stages of the game. When Zerg starts getting caught up and surpasses Protoss, that's when you start to think that Zerg's really won. So Zerg continues to harass. Some good harassment, not emphasizing the probes too much, just really trying to keep these Mutalisks alive to continue maximizing their damage over time. Look at this really great job by Luxury. All these Zerglings. I was just totally digging this. Look how many Zerglings that is. Very unusual to get that many at this stage in the game, especially given the modern dynamics of this matchup. And see, here come the Mutalisks continuing to harass. Great job with this Archon. I even recommend practicing that. And this was perhaps my favorite part of this entire game, was taking out that cannon, because it makes everything at that front so vulnerable. You need units up there at the front, but without that cannon, they can't defend themselves. Continual good harassment here. And even up to this attack, I mean, it's obviously depressing that this happened. So bad. I mean, clearly having that happens bad. Even Luxury's like, LOL, dude. So that's fine. And this attack right here, at this point I was going, okay, cool. This seems okay. Even this loss of Hydralisks, it seems okay to maybe continue bashing in a little bit more just to make sure this expansion doesn't get thrown up. And I think you should take a few shots here as Zerg and then continue working around, which is what we saw Luxury did. He tries to push in a little bit here, just continues to contain, and then pokes up there. Great. Fantastic. And right now, Luxury should be adding on some drones, and most importantly, you should be adding on lurkers. Because the worst thing in the world is when you're this Protoss, and you've just built all these gateways so you don't die, which is the thing that Geumchi barely just did, is barely didn't die. And then all of a sudden there's lurkers, and you have to go, oh god, and then you have to get the robotics bay, and you have to get observers, and then you have to have enough units to kill the lurkers that you now have observers for. And none of that happened. We just kept seeing Hydralisks and Mutalisks here. And even at this stage, when Luxury got all these Hydralisks out with these Mutalisks, the goal of this, to me, is to prevent this expansion. All this stuff should have been geared towards taking this out instead of just pushing into the main for the win. We see more pushing here. If he had pushed up this way... See, look at this position. We have Dragoons on both sides and Stormers coming up. But really, if you had pushed up here as Luxury and taken control up there, this expansion's just gone. We have a Mutalisk just making a cameo appearance. And you don't need to snipe off those Templars if you're going for this expansion. Look how helpless these Dragoons are to defend that expansion. And then after that, you should really be going for more expanding as Zerg. But Zerg didn't. Look, Zerg just keeps going for the front. Just keeps going for the front. Continuing to go for the front, and then... sudden loss. Depressing. I'm very sad. How frowny. And with that, allow me to unmute the chat, return back to the camera, to take some questions for the Day 9 Daily. Coffee... So some of the questions to ask, perhaps, are some of the transitions Luxury would have made. What mistake would we identify Geumchi make to put himself in that position? Yeah. So, someone said, oh, by the way, questions in yellow are always much easier to see. Someone says, in Zerg vs. Protoss, is map control very important? In all matchups, really, map control is very important, but in particular for Protoss to maintain map control is very, very key. And I guess I wouldn't even say it as Protoss needs map control so much as Protoss needs to make sure that Zerg does not have map control. Some of the techniques we see Protoss trying to make sure that Zerg doesn't get map control would involve having Corsairs with Reavers moving across the map, doing lots of harassment drops. That way Zerg kind of has to stay back, defending his own bases. Other techniques are just having a lot of Zealots with speed move out early. That's a very, very common technique in very classical Zerg vs. Protoss, is when the Protoss moves out with about four gateways worth of Zealots with +1 attack upgrade, then the Zerg has a really hard time moving out again, because again there's Zealots everywhere, and that gives Protoss the opportunity to expand and get the upper hand. So in fact, the entire purpose of Mutalisk Hydralisk, the 5-hatch Hydra combo, is to really maintain mid-game map control for Zerg. So there's just some other things to think about. If you want any more elaboration on that, if I didn't answer that question sufficiently so, hope I did, feel free to ask again in yellow, and I'll look it up. So this is a good question. Flash asks, could Luxury have sent 3 to 4 Hydralisks to Protoss's third while he had the pressure advantage? Oops, sorry, I just moved across here. Yeah, while he had the pressure advantage, it seems like he moved all Hydras in the front or all to the third. What Flash is referring to here is a very common technique, especially used by Terran players, which is to have the huge attack ball going for the main or some crucial area, and then just have a tank or a Vulture or 2 go somewhere else. I think it's a little bit better to have your Zerg units just packed together because they're so mobile. But yeah, I do think Luxury could have done something like that. I think maybe just even having 4 Zerglings go up there to check it out. A lot of times, it has to do with the fact that Zerg just does not know what units are up there, and if you send, I don't know, 4 Hydralisks up there, and there's 2 or 3 Zealots, it's just embarrassing, because then you have to, like, run away, and then your other Hydra Blob is a little bit weaker. The mobility of Zerg allows them to move around a little bit more freely. But I do think that, yeah, maybe that would have been a nice way for Luxury to defend that expansion. The most important thing I like about that question is that it addresses the issue of keeping that third under control. Always want to be thinking of clever ways to do that. So that's good thinking. Very strong, very strong. Question, let's see. Doopa-doopa-doo. Ooh, there are so many good questions I have to choose. It says, don't you think Luxury would have won with his over-aggressive style had he not lost the mutas? Also, Protoss mined his backdoor. Why didn't Zerg use it? Okay, so I'm going to answer the first part. Do I think Luxury would have had his over-aggressive style win if he didn't lose the Mutalisks? Ooh, that's kind of a tough question. Probably would have won. And I think that has to do with the fact that Luxury could have just gone straight up to the third with the Mutalisk and just killed the probe off immediately, instead of having to make that awkward U around the top. Having Mutalisks with that much mobility will allow you to kill things off. So I do think that was a pretty big blow. Obviously, you don't want to be dishing out 11 Mutalisks for nothing, but even with that loss, I think Luxury could have won as long as he monitored the third much more aggressively than he did. And your second question, which I forgot because I'll have to reread it. Protoss mined the backdoor. Why didn't Zerg use it? Because Hydralisks don't function well in narrow passageways, so there's really no purpose for it. If Luxury, for instance, transitioned to Lurkers earlier on, and use those for defense, then that backdoor would have been a nice entrance to do some more harassment, to make sure, again, that Protoss couldn't move out and take a third. But don't focus too much on those sorts of little tactics that you can abuse, because a lot of times it can backfire. Like, if you jam 2 or 3 control groups of Hydralisks back there, 2 Storms, just kill all of it. Not even close. I mean, even if you're microing, you'll still lose all of them, so whatever. So, when Geumchi moved out with Zealots, Archons, and a Dark Archon, if he had gone for a +1 attack, how would Luxury have stopped it? Let's see. How would Luxury have stopped it? Almost certainly with having just some sunken colonies, because if you look at the composition, there really were not that many Zealots. Just playing a little bit more defensively. And in fact, the transition we're starting to see more, which is to Mutalisks into Lurkers instead of Mutalisks into Hydralisks, that would have totally shut it down very effectively. But the sunken colonies are going to be the pretty big key to that. And again, I do think that the +1 attack upgrade would have given Geumchi a much bigger advantage early on. So, yeah. So someone said, do you think it would have been a more effective all-in strategy to research a drop? And, to research a drop and repeatedly drop Hydras onto Geumchi's 9 gateways. I'm terrified of drops. Dropping is one of the scariest things ever, because it can backfire horrifically. You can have this giant drop, be in the lead, like clearly going to win, and just screw up a little bit, and one or 2 storms will just absolutely demolish your entire drop. So, whenever you're doing that sort of drop style, or you want a big drop to be part of the game, you need to make sure that it is exploiting some position or some situation you forced Protoss into. A great example of using drops in an all-in is what GoRush did a lot on Medusa. GoRush would... Oh, and Oversky as well. GoRush would start putting Hydra pressure on the front of Protoss's base on Medusa, so Protoss would build a whole bunch of cannons. Then he would get Lurkers, and he'd start breaking down the temples, and he'd wander up there. So Protoss would build a whole bunch of cannons at his back entrance. So if you imagine, the Protoss has his main and his natural defended at the front with a whole bunch of cannons, and then he has his back door defended by a whole bunch of cannons. Then GoRush would just drop right into the main, which had no cannons. And that worked beautifully because Protoss spent all his money on defending areas GoRush was never going to attack. In this situation, because Geumchi had built up so many gateways, I think that maybe drops would have been crushed pretty easily. And even then, I don't think there's a need to be hitting the main. I think that the third base is the most important part of it. If, for instance, the Protoss had been expanding a whole lot, now we're maybe starting to see a situation where drops are going to be a lot more effective. If the drops, if you're trying to drop a Protoss who only has 2 bases, you need to have a lot of planning involved in it. So sweet, we still have like 5-10 minutes left for questions. Flash, that's a great question, but I'm going to delay it a little bit more. Let's ask Hemzat's question. It is, in a Protoss vs. Zerg, is it important to see what Zerg is doing, since Protosses never get Robo-Bay, to use observers to see what Zerg is doing? That is a huge, beautiful point to note. That is key. That is the key observation in Protoss vs. Zerg. That observation is what has shaped all strategies that Protoss have done for all time in this matchup. Because you cannot scout the Zerg very easily, and that is a fact. Zerg will be very good at denying your scouting. You either need to get Corsairs to scout, or you need to be putting so much pressure on Zerg that it forces his play to be narrower. Let me briefly say, what I mean by forcing is, if he does any of a certain set of options, he will automatically lose, so he, in a sense, is forced to follow certain paths. For instance, if a Zerg 9 pools, that forces the Terran not to early expand. Because if he does early expand on 14, like Command Center before Barracks, he'll die immediately. So you just don't need to worry about that. So for instance, so in that circumstance, we say that Zerg has forced a narrower set of options for Terran. In this case, in Protoss vs. Zerg, Protosses need to do things like have a lot of Zealots move out early on to really screw around with the Zerg. Because when that happens, now all of a sudden the Zerg maybe doesn't have as strong of an economy, and maybe his lurkers are pulled a little bit back, so Protoss has more control over the center of the map. The Mutalisks you get to see in advance because they have to defend this attack. You don't have to worry so much about Mutalisks in your main early on if you have 20 Speed Zealots with +1 attack demolishing Zerg's main. That's why I love so much when Protosses move out so much. That's why I love when Geumchi was moving out with those 4 Zealots and those 2 Archons so early on, because he's putting more pressure on the Zerg. Lots and lots of pressure, lots of continuing to move out at key times before Zerg attacks. That, in a sense, is how you take care of the fact that Protosses cannot really scout Zerg very well. Alternatively, you'd play a Bisu style, and the Corsair lets you scout a little bit early on, and then you can make a few decisions based on that. But again, scouting's still very difficult. Really, really great question. Like that quite a bit. Seraphim asks, when Geumchi lost those 2 Templars in the beginning, is that okay? Is it alright to lose those Templars? That is a difficult question to answer. Because the obvious response is, well, you don't want to lose any Templar now, do you? How do you answer that question? I think this is the best way to respond to it. Whenever you do end up getting Templar, they always run the risk of being sniped. So all of a sudden, a huge issue is to consider, should you morph those Templars into Archons, or how do I position my Templar so that they don't end up dying? In that circumstance, what you want to have happen is you want the cost of killing the Templar to be not worth it. If you have Templar tucked away in behind a whole bunch of cannons, suddenly it's not that cost effective for Zerg to go in and snipe it. So if Zerg ran into a bunch of cannons and killed the 2 Templar and maybe lost 3 or 4 Mutalisks, I would say, yeah, it's okay that you lost High Templar in that circumstance. In that game, I would say that it was not okay. That was a clear big advantage for Luxury to take those 2 out. And if you're in the same situation, what you should do then is to just morph those a little bit sooner, since they were on the path up there. Or you should rally Templar into your main and only move them to your expansion when it feels safe to do so. So, can you mentally weigh the pros and cons of going Corsairs instead of getting the Dark Archon with Maelstrom? Okay, I will try to mentally weigh those. we want to kill Mutalisks. And if we end up going for the Templar Archives first, this means we have less buildings that we've built. If we go for Templar Archives and Corsairs, we're ending up spending money just on having more structures that are only going to allow us to do anything. They're not going to necessarily do anything for us. In that fashion, what we're doing is using a smaller set and spending that money on a Dark Archon, obviously. I think then, what do I feel about that? See, the problem I have with the Dark Archon is that the Dark Archon really is just anti-Mutalisk at that stage. And given the situation, I kind of dig it. I kind of like what Geumchi was going for, because all that Luxury really had to defend was Mutalisks. And one well-placed Maelstrom would have wiped that out, and it just would have been Zealots and Archons against Zerglings. Total doom for Zerg. But the problem is, Dark Archons can't really do much else. The Corsairs, the fact that they can kill Overlords is huge. That allows the Corsairs to gain way more map control. And Corsairs are so fast and they fly, so you can scout a bunch. So I would label the Maelstrom as very cost-effective, given what Geumchi was doing, which is going straight for Templar Archives, but very, very specific, very, very targeted. And as a result, that makes it a little bit weaker. Later on in the game, you can use feedback for Dark Archons, and that's very helpful against Defilers, but at that stage in the game, it really only has the one use, so you need to be very careful to make sure it can do that, because it didn't in that game. It Maelstromed like 4 or 5 Zerglings, and Geumchi felt probably a little embarrassed, probably got a little bit rosy-cheeked if we got the chance to zoom in. So unfortunately, I only have one more question to take, and because Doomer was so kind as to make an extra special appearance on the stream, I will answer his. He says, without being results-oriented, how would you have transitioned with Lux's information? Do you think the flow of the game made him want to end it sooner? I don't think the flow of the game is what made him want to end it sooner. I think Luxury's personality and the fact that he hasn't been doing well lately is what motivated him to end the game a little bit sooner. If I were in Luxury's position, what I would have done is I would have been aggressive with the Mutalisks and done the Zerglings, and I would have used the Hydralisks and tried to push in. I wouldn't have lost the 11 Mutalisks. That's a mistake I would have avoided. But then I would have focused heavily on making sure that my opponent did not take his third, because the third is just a huge deal in Protoss vs. Zerg. And getting the Lurkers is very, very important. So I would have been putting pressure on the front, and right when that big push was happening, right after the 11 Mutalisks died, I would have been making drones, getting Lurkers, because right when Geumchi holds it off, I want him to try to come out and go, I can't do anything. And then I would have started making more units and slowly built back a stronger economy from there. So, yeah, I hope that was a satisfactory response. That ends the Day 9 Daily. Tune in tomorrow at 7 p.m., usual time for everything. And we will be doing Hogel vs. Free. Oh, my God, Hogel. Oh, faux Shogel. That guy is the man. I am digging it. And until then, feel free to chill out to the beats of Toe Jam and Earl.